Hello and welcome to From Then Till Now. In today's episode, gunpowder, cannons, and their effect on society. For hundreds of years, medieval society remained relatively stagnant, encased within the status quo of the feudal system. Local lords and nobles were able to solidify their control over local regions, and often defy the attempts of the monarch to centralize power. An uncooperative noble was a difficult issue to address, as they maintained private armies in the form of their feudal levies, and were relatively safe from the monarch behind the walls of their imposing castles. Towards the end of the medieval age, one factor above all others served to break this deadlock, and would contribute towards a radical shake-up of medieval society: gunpowder. A chemical combination of sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, the formula for gunpowder is first referenced in full in a Chinese text from the 11th century, although vague references to its incendiary capabilities appear in earlier works. Used for fireworks and scientific experiments, the Chinese appear to have used it for rocketry and explosives in warfare before they used it for firearms in the European style. Although the specifics are contested by historians, it is generally accepted that the Mongol conquests contributed towards the spread of gunpowder first to the Middle East and from there to Europe. By creating a single vast realm stretching from China to the Mediterranean, the Mongols facilitated the spread of knowledge and trade from one end of the continent to the other. Europeans appear to have been aware of gunpowder by the end of the 13th century, but it was not for another century that the manufacturing process had improved to the point of it being viable for warfare. By the 1340s and 1350s, references to guns and cannon were beginning to become widespread in Europe, including at the English siege of Calais in 1346. These early weapons were relatively primitive and not very portable, but they would continue to develop and improve till they slowly replaced other weapons on the battlefield, and importantly, contributed towards the decline of the castle and in part the medieval feudal system. The introduction of gunpowder weapons and cannon radically altered European society. These new weapons were expensive and they were specialized. Their chemical knowledge of the formula for gunpowder, the production and supply chain of reliable gunpowder, and the casting, storage, and transportation of specialized cannons, and the crew experienced in their operation all had a tremendous cost involved. In traditional medieval society, weaponry such as the sword, spear, and horse were all locally produced and simple to maintain and keep. The nobility who made up the knightly class in warfare were naturally trained in masculine martial pursuits through hunting, jousting, and riding. There was little or no specialized training or knowledge needed. Only larger, wealthier powers could afford to equip, train, and maintain specialists like gunners and cannoneers. The smaller nobles or lords in their local areas simply could not compete. In addition, the castles that had given these lords and nobles a certain degree of safety from outside forces, including an unhappy monarch, were no longer safe against the power of a siege cannon. The power was slowly shifting back in favor of a strong central power away from the local lords and nobles in their castles. Perhaps the most famous example of the dramatic change these weapons introduced into European society was the siege of Constantinople in 1453. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the onset of the so-called Dark Ages, the Roman Empire had survived in the East for another 1,000 years. From their capital at Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul in Turkey, these Romans had been safe behind their enormous Theodosian walls. They had been besieged many times, but the city was always safe behind these incredibly large fortifications. In 1453, the young Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed II, led his army of close to 100,000 troops against the garrison of a few thousand Romans, allies, and mercenaries. However, the city had withstood sieges before, and it may have come to nothing if it were not for the new cannon brought along by the Ottomans. 70 of these weapons were dragged along with the army, and over a long siege they managed to damage and ultimately breach a section of the walls. After bloody assaults on that weakened section of the wall, the city was captured and the Roman Empire finally came to an end through the power of the cannon. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to like, subscribe, and comment below any topics you'd like to see covered in a future video.